TALK.
The world is looking at El Paso.
What will we say to the world? From the KELP studio in El Paso, this is 915 Talk.
And now your host.
Good afternoon, beautiful citizens of the Borderland. This is 915 Talk, and I am your host, Andy Frecka. It's another beautiful day here in the heart of the world's largest borderplex. We are at the KELP studio, and I'm here with Mac Daddy Del Norte on the board. Mac Daddy, how are you doing today?
Yes, hello. I'm doing great.
Yeah, it's a big day. You know why it's a big day?
No, I don't know why it's a big day.
Oh, it's because every day that the Lord gives us is a big day.
Oh, that's right.
That's the number one reason. You know the number two reason?
No.
Well, we've been doing 915 Talk now for months and months on Fridays.
Yep, that is right.
But what is happening on Monday?
We're going to start doing talk daily.
Yeah, 915 Talk daily, every day of the week. Every weekday, Monday through Friday. And then on the weekends, we do play the recordings of our favorites, the best of.
The best of.
The week before. But I do encourage our listening community starting next week, every weekday to tune in between 4 and 5 p.m. And as we usually say at the end of 915 Talk, let's learn to love our city, love our neighbor, and give God all the glory. Now, Mac Daddy Del Norte, you were formerly known as Adrian the New Guy.
Adrian the New Guy, that's right.
Yeah, but you're no longer quite so new. And what has stuck out to you with 915 Talk in the past couple months?
Well, I love that we get to learn new things every time you go on there and ask questions.
Yeah, we've had a wide variety of people.
Yes.
And today we have a special guest. Do you know why he's special?
No, I do not.
Oh, you do not know why.
No.
Well, first of all, he is the unique expression of an endlessly creative God. But also he was actually, he's kind of my guru. He's kind of my guru when I look at city ministry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he's been actually influential in my life. He's not here in El Paso, but I thought it would be very good for us to have this conversation and talk about some of these foundational things about how we as believers look at the cities we live in as we plan to go daily on this program starting next week. So our guest today was a missionary in India for 25 years, and he's actually been with the mission I was with for quite a few years, Youth with a Mission. He's been with Youth with a Mission since 1975. Mac Daddy Del Norte, you don't even know about those kind of years.
No.
1975. You've only read about them in the books, but he's been in ministry for many years.
Wow.
He was in India, in the city of Chennai, and then he's been in San Francisco for the past 18 years, which is, I think for a lot of people in the church around the United States, they think of San Francisco, the Bay Area, as being, I don't know, the dark kingdom, the unconquerable kingdom, but he's there as an advocate of truth and light in some of the darkest places. He is the Bay Area coordinator of Youth with a Mission, and he also just is kind of sounding this call for city ministry globally. He's been very kind to join with us today, even though he just arrived back from a mission trip to India and is still a bit under the weather, and he's heading to Dubai next week. But I'm really looking forward to this conversation, being reminded of many of the things he taught me years ago, and then just also introducing some of these thoughts to our audience so that we can be better praying for our community. So what do you think, Mac Daddy Del Norte?
I think that sounds good. We should dive right in.
Yeah, well, okay then. Without further ado, let's remind our listeners, first of all, that we are on 1590 AM, 95.9 FM in El Paso, 89.3 FM in beautiful Las Cruces, New Mexico, streaming world on KELPradio.com. So wherever you are, maybe you are in Fabens, Hatch, New Mexico, maybe you're in beautiful Old Mesilla, about to go to get some great New Mexican cooking, or you're heading up north on Oro Grande. But wherever you are, let's give a beautiful and thunderous Borderland welcome to the one, the only, Mr. Tim Svoboda. Tim, welcome to 915 Talk.
Well, great to be with you, Andy.
Yeah, I can't believe that this conversation is even happening. You know, you and I met so many years ago in Russia, and I never thought that I would be living in El Paso. Actually, the one common thread between the two is starting to have an understanding of the cities that I live in.
Well, that's great. I remember meeting you way back there in beautiful Russia
Uh-huh.
and trying to figure out what does it mean to live in Russia and to love Russia and to be the incarnation expression of Jesus Christ in that beautiful country.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, actually, we're recording this conversation on February 24th, and this is marks to the day 3 years since the invasion of Ukraine. So our hearts are heavy for Russia, and we continue to believe that God will move there. I'm excited for. Well, I believe that God still wants to reach the Russian people, and He still has great plans, of course, for Ukraine as well. But when I was living in a city in Russia called Perm when we first met. It's a city of 1 million people. But then I was on my way to Moscow, a city of 20 million people, and the metro area is about 20 million. And I couldn't wrap my mind around how to reach a city of that magnitude. And I did my best for 12 years there in Moscow. Now I'm here in the world's largest borderplex. Here in El Paso, we have Juarez, in Mexico, just to the south of the wall. I can walk outside the station and I see Mexico. And then we have, southern New Mexico right to the north of us. What would your first recommendation be for someone who's going to ministry to a new city?
The first thing, I like to tell people when they go to a new city is just take time to explore the city.
Okay.
And to really get involved in it. And one of the best ways to do that is get lost.
Okay.
Literally, I mean, literally get lost.
Mhm.
Get on a bus and maybe you don't know where you're going. And
Okay.
You got your Google Maps with you and you just kind of track along and you'll start to get a feel for the city. Sometimes when people used to come to Chennai, I lived in Chennai, India for 25 years. And as a foreigner, they would come and sometimes I would give them a fake assignment.
Okay.
I would say, why don't you go down to Perry's Corner and buy me a Sharpie? And they would look at me and they go, where's Perry's Corner? And I would say, well, that's for you to find out. And Perry's Corner was about 20 kilometers away.
Oh,
And,
wow.
so they would, I'd give them my phone number and I would say, call me if you get lost.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes the best thing to do is to just go out and explore, ride the public transportation and experience the city for what it really is.
Now, why would that be important if you're there to do ministry?
I think sometimes a lot of people are afraid of cities and they feel like they're overwhelmed by the bigness of it.
Mhm.
And if you can learn to conquer the public transportation and you can learn to navigate your way through the city doesn't become so scary to you. And when the city is not scary to you, it starts becoming a friend to you. And when it becomes a friend to you, you start thinking about how do I love it and how do I minister to it?
Well, let me ask you this. Why would we want to love a city? I mean, shouldn't we just love the people? Because, I mean, cities are generally, kind of the most, it's a high concentration of sin because it's a high concentration of people.
Yeah, cities are people. And what you're going to end up doing is loving the people.
Okay.
But cities take on personalities according to the type of people that are there in the city. And, sometimes when I fly into airports, I like to just study the airport as I'm walking through it. Airports are portals into the city that you're going into. And sometimes the airport will speak volumes to you about the city that you're about to enter into. Not all airports. But here, like San Francisco, you fly into our airport, we have 75 art galleries inside of our airport.
Wow.
That tells you something about our city.
Sure.
We're a city of the arts. You fly into the Oslo, Norway airport, and you look at the ceilings and they're wood, curved wood, like the old Viking ships. You
Uh-huh.
fly into the Singapore airport, and it's like you've flown into a major shopping center of the world. And
Wow.
Singapore is really one of the big shopping centers of the world. Now, not all airports will do that, but
Right.
many airports will speak the language of the city that you're flying into.
Yeah, it would be interesting for people in El Paso to be thinking of what message the El Paso airport sends to new arrivals. What one of the things we do have here is a giant statue out front that kind of harkens back to the first Spanish explorers who came to the region, and just that whole history. The history in El Paso with European expansion actually starts before the Pilgrims, and so that's kind of it's interesting as you're saying that. I'm thinking of what else is at the El Paso airport, but you're saying just as soon as you arrive in any city, become observant.
Become observant and start sensing what you feel. Do you feel an open heaven? Do you feel a closed heaven?
Mm.
What kind of sense do you get? Is it a city of hospitality? When you fly into New Delhi, you can feel right away, boy, this is a political city. Whereas
Right.
you fly into Calcutta, India, and it's more of a city of the common person, and
Mhm.
you see everybody on the street mingling together. So cities have personalities, and those cities reflect the people that are currently in it, and the people that are in it reflect the nature of the city.
Yeah, one of the things I'm reminded of is when I first moved to Russia. I started a mission when I was 22 years old in basically Siberia, and I immediately felt pressure, and I don't know if it was explicit or implied, but a pressure to start ministry. And when I arrived, I realized I actually don't know how to reach these people. And so I took quite a long time, and I didn't know you at the time, but I took quite a long time just observing, drinking a lot of tea, getting to know people, and understanding really what the needs are, a bit more of the mindset of the people, rather than just immediately jumping into a ministry. And I think that is difficult. We feel like we have to do something.
Yeah.
But you're giving us something to do that doesn't immediately translate into really much of a newsletter.
Oh, many times when we start new ministries here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have about 10 different locations right now, and leaders will often ask me, "What should I do?" And I tell them, for the first 6 months, just walk the streets,
Uh-huh.
go visit the shops, talk to the people, sit down at the cafes, go prayer walking, and when you're done prayer walking, go prayer walking again, and then when you finish that prayer walk again. The reason we do prayer walking is so that we're not just walking through the city, we're allowing the city to walk through us. And we're
Okay.
getting a feel for, what does the city feel like? What is the vibe of the place? What's the psychology of the place? What's the people's attitude that's here? What's the religiosity of the place? What's the spirituality of the place? What's the architecture like? The architecture will oftentimes tell you about the type of people that are there, and the vibrancy or the restrictions that are on them. So I usually tell people that are trying to start ministries, don't start just doing something. Take time to know the location where you are.
Right. And so you said prayer walking. I don't know if everyone knows exactly what that is. That's a term I think I heard more that term used more in the 90s than lately. And I don't know why it's not as popular anymore. Maybe I'm not running in the same circles. But describe what a prayer walk would look like.
So prayer walking, I'm taking this from Steve Hawthorne's book. Prayer. It's called prayer walking, praying on site with insight.
Okay.
And
Praying
that's what
on
prayer
site
walking
with
is.
insight. Okay.
You're going on site to pray with insight.
Okay.
And there's different kinds of insight. There's a responsive insight where you're smelling, you're hearing, you're listening. So when I go prayer walking, I'm listening. What languages are being spoken? I'm looking at the restaurants. What restaurants are here? Restaurants will tell you about the people.
Okay.
If it's all Mexican restaurants, you have a large Spanish population. But then you start seeing Vietnamese restaurants, Chinese restaurants, Yemeni restaurants,
Right.
Sudanese restaurants. You might want to start asking yourself, why are these restaurants here?
Okay.
Maybe there's a Sudanese population. Maybe there's a Lebanese population. Maybe there's a Yemeni population that I'm not even aware about that's here in my neighborhood.
Mm.
So the one is what we call responsive insight. You're seeing, you're hearing, you're smelling, you're tasting, you're listening, you're observing. I always take a camera with me when I go prayer walking, but not a physical camera, but the camera of my mind.
Okay.
And I watch people as they walk towards me, and I look at their faces. What am I seeing? Am I seeing depression? Am I seeing joy? Am I what kind of demeanor do the people have that are walking on the streets? And I take a little picture of them in my mind and I pray for them. So that's what we call responsive insight. Then there's revealed insight. Revealed insight is where the Holy Spirit just speaks to you as you're prayer walking.
Okay.
You might be walking in a upper class neighborhood, and as you're walking to the upper class neighborhood, you're hearing the Lord speaking to you about praying for people that are maybe committing suicide, or domestic violence. All of a sudden comes to your mind. Just because the place looks beautiful doesn't mean that everything behind those four walls is going on in a great way.
Right.
There might be wife abuse. The kids might be thinking about suicide.
Mhm.
So you begin to get insight as you listen to the Lord. And then the third kind of research, or the third kind of insight, is what we call researched insight. And that's where it gets a little bit more where you start digging down a little bit more into research about the city or the neighborhood that you're working in or that you're living in.
What would some of the things you'd be looking for in that research be?
Well, you want to look at things like census data.
Okay.
Sometimes the census data goes down to census tracts, which are smaller than zip codes. And,
wow.
they're usually about maybe 30,000 people or so or less. And oftentimes they break it down by languages. So you can start seeing within a few block area where you live, what are the languages that are around me? And then obviously you want to start looking at, well, if there's, people that are speaking Yemeni language or Arabic language, or they're speaking Lebanese, or they're speaking Russian, and they're in my neighborhood, are there churches that speak their language?
Yes.
If there's not churches that speak their language, for those people to say they're going to go to an English-speaking church, that's a pretty big endeavor for them to cross that culture and go into an English-speaking church.
Right.
So I like to look at cities in that light, where I really break them down a little bit more and look at kind of like the population, and look at some of the problems that are there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's super interesting. I think it's a good challenge for us as the church in El Paso to get to know our city. It's interesting for me. I've often said that, or what I've come to observe here is, well, first of all, El Paso is not a destination city. There's no one in San Francisco right now where you're at considering moving to El Paso because of the job opportunities here. while there's probably plenty of people in El Paso considering a move to places like Dallas and Austin, maybe Houston, and so on. So it's not a destination city, and at the same time, that there are different reasons why people either live here or move here. A lot of people live here because they're like Mac Daddy Del Norte. They were born and raised here. This is their hometown. And what I've found is very often the people who live here know the city. They're passionate about it. This is their land. They want to invest in it. But there's another category, and we have Fort Bliss here, one of the biggest military bases in the United States. And so a lot of people come because of the military, either as, of course, service members or contractors or whatever the case may be. And then they stay here for a little while, or they just end up hanging out for a long time. But the issue I see there is quite often they see their time here as just doing their time, where I think if we're believers, we need to invest in whatever city we're in, for even if we're only there for a few days or a few years or our whole lifetime. So it's that's kind of our dynamic here in El Paso. But I think it's a good reminder for us to get to know the city we live in. Even if you're like Mac Daddy and you grew up here, there's always some things you can learn that you don't know yet. And that's I think a good encouragement for us. We're about to take a break. We're with Tim Svoboda. He's the Bay Area coordinator of Youth with a Mission, and he's someone who is instrumental in my life in just getting an understanding of ministry in cities. We have this program 915 Talk, where we're learning to love our city, love our neighbors here in our Borderland community. And I think it's good for us just to be reminded of why we're doing this. Why are we learning about all the things we're learning about on 915 Talk? Before we go into the break, just want to say a special thank you to our impact partners, Caring Companions El Paso. If you have an elderly family member, or maybe someone who just went through an operation, has some kind of health issue, and they want to stay at home, you want them to stay at home, but they need that extra care, check out Caring Companions El Paso. Good people over there, and I have friends who are employing them for their elderly family members, and they speak very highly of them. Also, AlamoGlassPros.com. If you have a chip or a crack on your windshield, good people over at Alamo Glass Pros. There's a lot of sunlight here in El Paso, get your windows tinted. Become cool like Mac Daddy Del Norte. He has tinted windows. And for that, check out AlamoGlassPros.com. Again, this is 915 Talk. We're about to go on a break. Do not touch that dial.
We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
915 Talk is listener supported. If you believe that local Christian talk radio is important to our community, please take a moment to prayerfully consider taking part. For all donation options, including secure online giving, visit kelpradio.com and click on the Cornerstone Broadcasting link. Let's reach our neighbors in the Borderland together.
We're back. You're listening to 915 Talk.
And we're back. This is 915 Talk. We're with Tim Svoboda, the Bay Area coordinator of Youth with a Mission, and he was also a missionary in India for 25 years in the major city of Chennai. That was formerly Madras, right, Tim?
That's right.
Yeah, and what is the population of Chennai?
Well, Chennai, when I was there, was 8 million people. Now it's about 13 million people.
Wow. Yeah. India is an amazing country. I've had the privilege of going there 4 or 5 times. Always thoroughly enjoyed my time in India. But for you personally, did you start off in your ministry understanding cities, or is that something that came later?
It actually came later. I was, when I went to India, we started a training center, and we were doing a lot of training, and we were actually sending people outside the city to go do ministry, sometimes really far away. And I remember I really got challenged by one of our students one time that just really challenged me about how well do I know the city that's right at my fingertips.
Okay.
And I did know. I knew India well, but I was keeping that old Western mentality that mission is over there somewhere. And mission was always a trip. Get on an airplane, or get on a bus, or get on a train, and you got to go over there to go do mission.
Right.
And they started really challenging me about, well, what about mission at your doorstep?
Mhm.
And I was like, well, there's enough churches around here. But the more I began to look at my own doorstep, I began to realize, hey, wait a second, there's a lot of unreached people groups right here. And so that changed my whole mentality to start looking at how can we be missional where we are.
Okay, so what were some of those things that you began to notice that you hadn't noticed before?
I began to see that there's a large Muslim population,
Mhm.
and there was absolutely nobody, no mission agency, no church, except for one that I remember right now, that was trying to reach out to the Muslim population.
Uh-huh.
And then there was a street kids population, 150,000 kids living on the streets of the city, and there was hardly any Christian organization reaching out to them.
Yeah,
Um,
so not to make light of that, but I guess in retrospect, it could possibly be amusing that you were training people to go into ministry, and instead of noticing the 150,000 street children right there, you're traveling somewhere else, either around India or around the world.
yeah, mission, I think in our minds, we tend to think when I go on mission, that means I'm going somewhere other than where I live.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I began to realize, oh, wait a second, what about where we live?
Uh-huh.
How do we be on mission there? And of course, that comes out of it really comes out of Jeremiah chapter 29
Right.
of the Israelites living in the city of Babylon.
Yes.
And Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 7 says, seek the peace and the prosperity of the city to which I have sent you into exile. Pray for it, for if it prospers, you too will prosper.
Tim, I can't even believe you brought up that Bible verse. That's kind of a central Bible verse to this radio program. It's almost funny because we didn't talk about this before we started recording today. But when I first moved to El Paso, my wife quickly found a job at a local private Christian school. But I was wondering, what am I doing? And I just had to put food on the table because we'd lost everything after fleeing Russia. And I was selling solar panels door to door. And I did that for about a year and a half. And I got to know the city. I'll tell you, Tim, I walked El Paso. I got to know the people of El Paso. I sometimes would knock 500 doors in 2 weeks, and you meet all these families. And when you're selling solar panels, one of the things you do if you make a sale is you run their credit. And when you run their credit, you really get to know their personal situation. Sometimes someone would be like, well, actually, I'm about to get a divorce, or actually this. And you begin to understand that the challenges people are going through. And I just saw how America had changed since I last had left, 23 years earlier. And in the middle of all this, I really felt I was supposed to be doing something other than selling solar panels. But the verse that Rachel, my wife, gave me were those exact verses where it says, and I'm going to paraphrase, when you get to the city you've been exiled to, plant gardens, build houses, give your sons and daughters in marriage. And basically just saying, you're going to be here for a minute or more, and you better invest in the city, and then seek the welfare of the city and pray to the Lord on its behalf, because the welfare of that city is your welfare. And as I was praying about that verse that the Lord had spoken to my wife, the only thing I saw was radio ministry. And I was like, I can't think of a better way to seek the welfare of El Paso, southern New Mexico, this borderland community, than jumping into this radio ministry. So here we are after all of that. But I mean, it is interesting to think how many ministries are really seeking the welfare of the city rather than just the welfare of their ministry or the people involved in their ministry.
Yeah, it's such a key verse. The Israelites were hoping to go back to Jerusalem. Hananiah, the false prophet, had told them, within 2 years, you're going to go back.
Right.
Whereas Jeremiah said, no, you're going to be here for a long time.
Yeah.
And Jeremiah was in some ways singing the song of Nebuchadnezzar, because Nebuchadnezzar, he wasn't enslaving the Jews. He wasn't oppressing the Jews. He was trying to assimilate the Jews into Babylonian culture. And by assimilating them, he was hoping that he would conquer them by showing them that the Babylonian culture was greater than their culture.
Right.
And Jeremiah was like, hey, wait a second, settle down, plant gardens, build houses, give your sons and daughters in marriage, pray for the city, get involved in the life of Babylon, but keep your Jewish identity as you do that. And so you see Daniel rising up as the king's royal advisor, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego becoming governors over territory. So the Jews began to serve in society, and they were light in the midst of darkness. And that's what we are supposed to be as Christians, not despising where we live, but loving where we live and serving it and seeking its shalom. And as we do that, we find our shalom.
Yeah, and I love that learning to the phrase that we use here on this program is let's learn to love our city. I think sometimes that can be a journey. I know it was for me here in El Paso. I came and I wasn't particularly happy even to be here in the beginning, but I think God can, if we allow him to, he can take us on this journey. He can begin to show us the needs of the people in the city that we're in. And then over time, we truly begin to love it, not just as a matter of words, but from the heart.
Yeah.
So how do we impact the city and not lose our identity as believers?
Well, I think that, we need to learn, just as Moses, he was schooled in all the wisdom of Egypt. We're to learn the wisdom of the Babylonians, but not necessarily the values of the Babylonians.
Okay. So the wisdom, you said the wisdom of the Babylonians, but not the values.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times as Christians, we tend to isolate ourselves so much from non-Christians.
Okay.
And non-Christians are doing a lot of great stuff.
Okay.
Non-Christians sometimes are doing a lot more stuff than what we as Christians are doing.
Yeah.
And so, what is the common ground that we can forge with the Babylonians or with the non-Christians in our context that's pursuing the common shalom of El Paso or of the territory where we live? So it's I think yesterday the challenge of yesterday was, how does the charismatics work with the Baptist?
Okay.
I think that's no longer a challenge anymore. I think the challenge today is, how do non-Christians work together with Christians? How do people of good faith work with people of no faith? And how do we work together for the shalom of the place? And as Christians, we're working together with non-Christians. We're rubbing shoulders with them, and they're becoming our friends.
Right.
And as they're becoming our friends, our simple conversations are leading to serious conversations, and our serious conversations are leading to spiritual conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And we're working together in common projects, common good projects for the shalom of the place where we are.
Yeah, it is interesting when it comes to community issues. Very often the church is just not interacting with that. As a matter of fact, I was at a meeting of nonprofits here in El Paso, and I walked in and I looked around and I was like, where are the Christians?
Yeah.
And all these other nonprofits where probably there are different values where I would strongly disagree with them, but they are there. They care about the city. And wouldn't it be great if the people of our city knew that the church cares about our city? And so often that's not the case. What kind of questions would you ask a ministry or a church to determine if they're reaching their neighbors or their city?
Does the church have programs that's attractive to non-Christians?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember one of my pastor friends here in San Francisco. He was pastoring a dying church in the quite, progressive LGBTQ community.
Mm-hmm.
And there was only about 5 people in the church.
Uh-huh.
And he was in a neighborhood that was very progressive. And he thought, well, how do I open the doors of my church to my neighborhood? They're not going to come for church services.
Okay.
And he decided to open the doors of his church at 10 o'clock at night till 2 o'clock in the morning and play board games.
Wow.
And he had the neighborhood coming out to play board games in the basement of the church.
Wow.
And he told me, he said, Tim, when you start playing board games with your neighbors, you start finding out a lot of stuff about them.
Right.
And they found the church became a friendly space for the neighborhood.
Mm.
That became a bridge for his ministry into the neighborhood. The neighbors didn't see the church as something that was against them, but it was a place that had an open door for them.
Mm.
Now, they maybe still didn't want to come to church, but they came from the board games.
Yeah.
And that was the first step to getting them to actually come to church.
Yeah. We had Pastor Christian Gurola. He's the pastor of Mesa Place Church here in El Paso on 915 Talk, I guess, a couple months back. And when they first started the church, they were close to downtown. And they did kind of an inventory of how the church was reaching the community around them. And the only thing, so the question they asked is, if the church ceased to exist, how would that change life for our neighbors?
Yeah, that's a good one.
And the only thing they could come up with was they wouldn't be able to use our dumpster anymore. They were, I love the candor of Pastor Christian as he shared that story with me. But then he said, what was happening is, people who had extra trash were throwing it in the dumpster. And so it was creating a problem for the church. And so some of the church leaders came to him and said, we need to put a lock on the dumpster. And he said, don't do that. That's the only thing we're doing to reach our neighbors. But they've since moved to the east side of El Paso. But one of the things they do is a car show. Kind of these vintage or, whatever the case may be, which are really popular here in El Paso, and just get the community, exactly what you said, involved, just breaking down that barrier of even not just walking through the door of the church, but at least stepping onto the parking lot. Because I remember one of the questions you posed to us with Youth with a Mission in Russia is, if we went and asked your neighbors, who are these people over here in the mission?
Yeah.
What would they say? And of course the answer would be, well, they're a little bit weird. They play the guitar and sing sometimes. We see them driving in and out. We have no idea. They seem nice. They smile a lot, but they're pretty weird.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good place to start, is how well do our neighbors know us? And
right.
If we cease to exist, what would people miss about us?
Right. Exactly.
Those are really key questions. I know, here at our YWAM center here in San Francisco, every day our doors are open. People come in for showers. They come in to use our bathrooms. They come in to rest in our community center. They come in to play pool. They come in to play ping pong. And so it's just a constant stream of people that are coming in. And, our goal is to learn to know their names and
Right.
to have a relationship with them.
Right. It's not an easy place to be. I think in San Francisco, it has a very much a set of challenges. Here in El Paso, it's also a very unique community. El Paso isn't really like the rest of Texas. It's not like Mexico, and it's not like New Mexico. The borderland is its own culture, and it's kind of an island here in the middle of the desert, because if you leave El Paso, when the city stops, it's going to be a lot of sand before you get to the next city.
Yeah.
I'm going to be going to San Antonio, I guess in about a month and a half. And one of the things when you drive to San Antonio is between El Paso and San Antonio, it's, if I remember correctly, 7-hour drive. There's pretty much nothing. And so here we are in El Paso, Juarez, U.S., Mexico. Of course, we have the border, and it's its own thing. And just learning all these things. Again, we're with Tim Svoboda. He is the Bay Area coordinator of Youth with a Mission there in San Francisco. He's been a missionary with Youth with a Mission since 1975. He's someone who has been instrumental in my life and just pointing me towards the city. And as we move now next week towards 915 Talk being every weekday from 4 to 5 p.m., I thought it was important for us to have this conversation with Tim and be reminded of the importance of getting to know our community, because that's what we're doing here on 915 Talk. In March, we'll be talking to a district representative from El Paso. We'll be talking with Pastor Pancho Murguia from Juarez, who is overseeing 15 migrant shelters. He's going to share about that, but also he feels called not to pastor a church, but to pastor a city. We're going to have TxDOT in here talking about our roads. Let's get to know all these issues. We're going to be talking with people about insurance. How is that changing after everything that's going on in California? We're going to be talking about the real estate market in El Paso. Let's get to know our city. Let's get to love it. And it's good to be reminded that there's definitely a biblical basis for knowing the city that you live in. We're about to go into a break. During the break, you'll hear from Pastor Terry Gray. He's on at 5 p.m. now every day, right after 915 Talk with expository teaching. And he's a pastor of Sun City Calvary Church. I had the chance to be over at that church a few months back and share the message. What a vibrant, active congregation. Really enjoy getting to know them. Be sure to listen to Summons every day at 5. And if you're on the west side of El Paso and you are looking for a church home, check out Sun City Calvary. We're going to go into a break. Do not touch that dial.
We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
Are you looking for a Bible teaching church on the west side of El Paso? This is Terry Gray, pastor of Calvary Chapel Sun City and speaker on the Summons broadcast, heard each weekday at 5 p.m. here on this station. Calvary Chapel Sun City is located at 960 West Borderland Road on the west side of El Paso. We hold services on Wednesday evenings at 7 and on Sunday mornings at 9 and 11. You can find out more information about us on the web at www.ccsuncity.org. The Lord bless you, my friends.
We're back. You're listening to 915 Talk.
And we're back with my good friend Tim Svoboda. Again, he's with Youth with a Mission. He's someone who is just making a call to the church, to missionaries, to really get to know the city that they live in. He was talking about when he first started serving in India, where he was a missionary for 25 years, how he would train missionaries in India and then send them somewhere else. And then he began to realize that there was need right there in that town, that city, that major city of Chennai. Tim, really have enjoyed this conversation. Have you ever been to El Paso?
No, I don't think I have.
You have not had the chance or the privilege of doing that?
No, I don't think I have.
Okay, and I love asking this question to people who have never been here before. How would you describe El Paso to someone? And just give it your best shot. You can be completely wrong. We are Christian radio, so we won't judge. We'll try not to judge you. We probably will, but we will.
How would I describe El Paso? Well,
Yeah.
my good friend Andy Frecka lives there, and I guess it's a border town.
Yes, it is a border town.
And I don't have any images in my mind of El Paso, but I envision it being a fairly small city.
Okay, but what would you say the population is?
1.5 million people.
Okay, that's small. Okay, yeah, all right. Please continue.
I guess a lot of ranches on the outside.
Ranches. Okay, all right. So ranches, border. What do you? I'm just going to ask you the hot button issue. Like what do you think it looks like for us with the border?
Oh, well, I would imagine your hot button issue is migrants.
Right, but what do you think it looks like for us here?
What does it look like for you there?
Yeah, because of course there's images on the news, but what do you think it's like to live in a border city with that issue?
I guess probably a lot of frustration.
Okay.
And probably a lot of probably a lot of frustration and anxiety about people taking over your town.
Well, that's an interesting way to put it. So this is what I have: population 1.5 million people, ranches, and frustration and anxiety. So I love this. The population. So the population of Juarez is, I believe, 1.6 million.
Okay.
And one of our favorite things to do is when people come to El Paso is we'll take them up on the mountain. So there's a mountain right in the middle of the city, and it's a desert landscape. And at night, you stand on the mountain and you look back at the city, and you can't see a wall, and all you see is lights going to the horizon. And for a lot of people, it just looks, what they say is, oh, this is just one city. But Juarez is 1.6 million. El Paso is quite a bit smaller. It's, I think, about 750, 800,000. And the metro area is about 1 million. And then we have Las Cruces just up to the north. It's about, actually, I don't remember. I think it's 170,000. I'm sure I'll get an angry phone call if I got that wrong. But then there are some ranches around. I think that they're starting to disappear. But there's a lot more pecan orchards and farms. But you're pretty close. And then frustration and anxiety, one of the issues here is a lot of our hot button issues as a city are not decided by the city. They're decided by the federal government. And so it is an interesting time because the world is looking at El Paso. The political situation is looking at El Paso. There's more and more pressure, particularly on the immigrant issue. One thing I'll say is, and I kind of hinted at this, but very often when there was a surge at the border, I would find out about it, not because of anything I saw, but because a friend from Europe would call me and ask me if I was safe and okay. Because it was just, on the news, one point. But the frustration and anxiety here is, of course, there's a lot of people who are undocumented. They're living in, there's a lot of concern and fear there. Also, there's a lot of really good people who work in border enforcement, and they're also under a lot of pressure right now. And even we had a week of prayer for them. We have a program called 915 Pray, and we were praying even for their families, because a lot of times those border enforcement personnel, their families are now being bullied by their friends, their relatives, their neighbors because of everything that's going on. So there is some tension there. But I would say most people, when they arrive in El Paso, you don't really see that, at least at first glance. Yeah. You just begin to notice it over time. So That's you know, what a lot of people say is it's one of the friendliest cities they've been to. I always encourage people to drive over the bridge and spend some time in Juarez during daylight hours anyway, saying kind of the central areas, and go get a bite to eat, get to know that area. And you know, when you talked about working as a missionary and forgetting about your own city, I think the issues here is often the churches in El Paso, when they go on a mission trip, they'll go to the Philippines, which is great. Don't get me wrong. They'll go to India, they'll go to Europe, Africa, whatever the case may be. But very often they're not going to Juarez. Right. And so that's one of our challenges here. So you did pretty good.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah. So, just in understanding what El Paso is from a distance, I would love to see you. We would love to invite you. I'd love to walk the streets with you. You also we're talking about prayer walking in the beginning of our talk, and I would love to see church groups. You know, you have a Wednesday night prayer meeting, just walk the neighborhood together. Yeah. Just walk outside your church, just walk around and pray together in the neighborhood.
It would be interesting to know how Juarez affects El Paso and how El Paso affects Juarez, because they're side by side. They're almost like they're one city, but they're not one city.
Yeah, they are, and they're not.
There's a mayor of Juarez and there's a mayor of El Paso, and it's two different countries, but they share a very common land together.
Yes,
and there's a lot of bleeding over of one another.
100%.
It'd be really interesting to understand how does El Paso affect Juarez, and how does Juarez affect El Paso?
Yeah, that's a huge question. That's a huge question, and I would be slow to answer it, because I think that's something that we as a church also need to dig a bit deeper into. I think one thing is the church in El Paso has a lot to learn from the church in Juarez, and vice versa. But I don't know if many of those conversations are happening.
Even here we have San Francisco affects Oakland, and Oakland affects Berkeley, and Berkeley affects San Francisco.
Right.
It's kind of a triangle with those three cities, and they do play off of one another.
Right. It's a very interesting dynamic, to say the least. But let's just here in this last couple of minutes that we have, what would your challenge be to the church as they're looking to get outside their four walls?
Love where you live.
Mm.
Love where you live. Get to know who's your mayor, who's your ward, who's your counselor, your district supervisor. Maybe you have different names for them here. Here in San Francisco, we have district supervisors. Who's your district supervisor? Who's your police chief? Get to know them. Attend their meetings. Get outside the four walls of the church. Get involved in different civic activities, and learn to love where you are. You cannot love what you do not know. Take time. Loving a place is like, it's like a personality. Get to know it, and that would be my challenge to you.
Love it. We've been with Tim Svoboda of Youth with a Mission San Francisco, and talking about just what he just said, learning to love our city. And that's what we're working to do here on 915 Talk. May the church in El Paso here in the Borderland be known as a church that loves the city it lives in. And may we step outside those four walls even during our prayer meetings, or maybe even especially during our prayer meetings. Let's ask our neighbors what they know about our churches, even if the answers aren't always what we want them to be. And absolutely, of course, as a Former missionary myself. Let's reach the nations, but let's not forget about our next door neighbors. And just a reminder to everyone that 915 Talk is going to be going each weekday starting this next Monday. Every day, Monday through Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. Tune in for conversations about the Borderland. Tim, again, thanks again for coming in. Really appreciate your time, and hope that we can talk again soon.
Yes, thank you, Randy. Love being with you.
Yeah, and as we always say at the end of 915 Talk, let's learn to love our city, love our neighbor, and give God all the glory. This has been 915 Talk. You have been listening to 915 Talk on KELP Christian Radio. To listen to past recordings of 915 Talk, just visit KELPradio.com and click on the 915 Talk link. Until next time, love your neighbor, love your city, and give God all the glory.